Thanks for listening to the STEM Factually podcast. This is Dr. Marissa with another STEM Stacks episode. This episode's actually focused around an idea I had about talking about science at the dinner table. So like a mealtime talk for parents that are interested in incorporating more science into their day-to-day lives with their children. And I think this is really important because it's really necessary for kids to realize that parents care about science and what's going on in the world around them. And your kids can't just think about STEM when they're in a class. They have to think about it all the time so that they see that it's relevant and that it relates to their everyday. And it's a great time for you as a parent to actually influence how your child sees the science in popular culture, in a political setting. It's very important that you discuss these important topics with your child in a place where they are sitting and focused on you. That's when I find that my children are younger, but my 3 and 2-year-old actually, I make the most progress with them is when we sit at a table and they're only focused on eating and they're more receptive to discussion. So that was kind of how I came up with it. My kids enjoy hearing about science at the dinner table. I enjoy talking about science. And I often can't come up with anything to talk about when I'm sitting with my kids. So we do this periodically and they pick up a lot. So I thought I would introduce it to a larger audience. Okay, so to get down to the details, this particular episode will be a topic, clean energy, and it's geared towards 3 kind of modules. One for ages 3 to 6, then one for ages 6 to 12, and then one for 12 plus. I recommend listening to the entire podcast because it really builds off itself. So none of the content is very young in level or conceptually at a 3 to 6-year-old level. It's just discussed in a different way. So anyone can learn from any section of the podcast, and it's good to know the base and then build off it to stack what you've learned when you're talking to your older kids. I also did it this way so that if parents have kids that are in more than one range, that you can talk to all of your kids at the same time about the same topic while introducing something to every child at a level they can understand. So it was I put a lot of thought into how it's laid out so that the whole thing is useful to a number of age groups. So let's get started. Parents. So one thing that's really important is that parents of any background and understanding can talk about science with their kids. You don't need formal training to learn science. And I think it's really important that all parents realize that you do have a lot of ability to teach something that you necessarily don't understand. I think the shortcoming that you have to be very careful of is that if you don't understand the topic, you shouldn't take a strong stand on one perspective or another until you do the work and understand the details, etc. I think that's where the tricky part comes in, is accepting when you approach science that you may not know all the answers. I also don't always know all the answers. A PhD is in a particular niche, and when I talk about science, I'm very quick to talk with my kids and say, listen, I don't know the answer to this. I don't have an opinion on it, but I do know where to find the resources for us to answer these questions. So that's really important, is one, to realize that you can teach your kids science if you have no science background, but you are also teaching yourself science, and you need to learn how to parse through information, find bits that are useful, and then take what you've learned and talk to your kids about it. And then also be honest and upfront about what you don't know. And then from STEM Factually, we help you learn how to find the resources that you need and where to go when you don't know the answer to a question. So, this is kind of a learning experience for everyone. And what's unique about the field of science is that it's an exploratory field. We're asking questions and trying to answer them with data and research. So, scientists, we often don't know the answers. And that's one of the things that makes science so interesting and engaging, is that there's so much unknown, and we are able to learn the skill set that we need through grad school, etc., to ask these questions and then find ways to physically answer them. So, just something to keep in mind. You don't need to know everything, but you should be aware of your limitations when you're teaching science. So, the focus, like I mentioned already, is about clean energy. What is it? How do we harvest it? How do we use it? And where are we going with this? So this first module is for kids, around 3 to 6. Every kid is different. My 3-year-old has known the entire periodic table since he was 2. I know, 10-year-olds that have never heard of the periodic table. So it takes, you just pick the bits and pieces that are relevant to your child and keep building off them. So I really think that the preschooler to, kindergarten, first grade is such a great age to start introducing science. I've been shocked at what my child has been able to pick up just from, introducing and incorporating little bits of science into his life ever since he was a baby. He sees my periodic tables, he sees my chemistry textbooks, he's interested. So I briefly talk about little bits, and he can see I'm excited about science, and so he's excited about science. And I never had any expectations for him to learn or pick up any of the content that I've taught him. I was just sharing something I enjoy. And I've been so surprised at how much he's been able to learn and absorb and enjoy. So don't ever think that your child's too young to learn anything. You just have to find a way to break it down so that they can get something out of it. What I've found is that it's important to not force advanced topics or expect a particular knowledge of your young child in the 3 to 6 range. Rather, I try to relate to them. So I find the science of their world and I take that content and relate it back to things that they know. And then I also try to focus on terminology a little bit. So getting in those vocabulary words from science that they may have never heard and try to acclimate them to that language, because it helps to have, like emulsion or other words that you may not even know until you hit a science class. But we can talk about the emulsion of a salad dressing and make it an everyday term. So when they do hit science classes, it's no longer a mystery or like they're hearing someone speaking a different language on top of new content. I think it's also really important to be playful and ask a lot of questions and then pause while your child answers. My child actually takes quite a while to answer questions, and I will let him think, and then I give him, 30 seconds to think, and then I'll prompt him again with the same question, and then I give him more time to think, and then if he doesn't answer, I'll help him along, come to the question himself, and then I relate it back to what he knows. Relation is very important for them to actually get something out of the content that you're teaching them. So here's an example discussion of how I would talk to a 3 to 6 year old. You could adapt this to your child or your speaking style so it doesn't sound like you're reading cue cards. But I thought an example would be useful. So I'm just going to go right into this. Hey, let's talk about energy today. Do you see the lights in the room? Can you point to them? How do you think they work? Yeah, they use something that's called energy to light up the room. Energy is like the power needed to get things moving or going. The food you're eating gives you energy to play. It'll help you move around and jump and dance. Have you ever heard me say, wow, you have a lot of energy? Or let's get some of that energy out. Let's go outside. It's similar to that. Your food is a source of energy. Well, lamps and light bulbs, our TV, phones, all these different electronics use energy to function. What else can you think of in our house that uses energy? Can you think of anything outside that uses energy? What about your toys? Do your toys eat food? No. They get energy from charging in the wall or from batteries, right? They use electrical energy. Electrical means the energy comes from tiny particles called electrons in the form of current. Where does the energy come from? Can you think of maybe where? Yeah, the wall outlet. How does it get into the outlet though? So there's a few things here you notice. I introduced quite a few terms: energy, power, electrical, electrons, even something like particles, current. And I don't define them. I just use them in context multiple times. And I relate it back to things that they know. So it's like energy gets related back to play. Electrical keeps getting related back to the wall. And then at the end of introducing all that terminology, I wrap them back in. So where does the energy come from? That's the goal, is we're talking about the lights, we're talking about energy, we're trying to figure out where the energy comes from. So back into the model discussion. Remember when we were outside today, did you see the sun? It was so bright and shiny. Did it make you feel happy when you saw it? How did you physically feel? Did your face feel warm when the sun hit it? That warmth is a type of energy. Did you feel the wind blowing? It was so strong, it almost blew you over. See it blowing the trees? Look out the window. That's a type of energy. Have you ever gone swimming in the pool and you take your hands or kick your feet and make waves? Did you feel how strong the waves were? Or when we're watching a river, have you seen the water flow? That's all different types of energy. We can collect that energy and turn it into electrical energy that goes into the wall outlets and charges our toys or a light. That is pretty neat, right? The different energy we can get from nature, such as solar, that comes from the sun, or wind energy from the wind, hydro from water, those are all sources of clean energy. Can you say clean energy? Note the repetition that I glaze over a lot of words and topics, and I ask lots of questions, and then most importantly, relate the concepts back to the child's worldview. That's what's really important with this age, is that they're trying to understand the world that they can see, and abstract concepts will not make sense to them to the degree that they would with an older child. So trying to incorporate science into their day, into their world, is a good way to start familiarizing them with terminology, topics, concepts without overwhelming them. So, obviously, they're not going to always be able to remember the terms that we use, But what would be neat, for example, is if your little 3-year-old can identify different types of clean energy. Oh, look, that's a windmill. That's from the wind. It's clean energy. Oh, it's a solar panel. Look, guys, can you see the solar panels while we're driving by? Look, what is that? Oh, it's collecting clean energy. That's awesome. We can build off that and we can add to it as they get older. So, assuming your 6 to 12-year-old knows the topics that were discussed in the previous bit, we can build off those topics and discuss in more depth. I'm approaching it this way, so if you have kids at different ages, you can step right from one age into the other at dinner time. Younger kids are done eating sooner. Maybe you make them stick around. Maybe you let them go play. But the older kids can definitely stick around for a little longer and get some depth after they've heard what the younger kids have. So I actually have the least experience teaching 6 to 12-year-olds. So I am learning the best ways to approach that as my kids grow. And I would love to hear your feedback with my approaches. If you do have a 6 to 12-year-old, just our handle is at STEM Factually, and we're on Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, or you can go to my website and send me an email comment. But I'd love to hear feedback from people that have actually tried this and do have a 6 to 12-year-old, or if you're a teacher that teaches kids in that age group, I would especially appreciate feedback because I'm kind of learning as I go along with the 6 to 12-year-old group. Since, again, I have the least experience in that. So kids this age are able to explore a lot of STEM and are starting to hopefully show a budding interest in STEM in general. So I do think relation is still very important at this age, and making sure that they're aware that these STEM concepts do relate to their everyday lives. But I think what's most important at this age is getting them to ask questions and start promoting a curiosity about the world around them. 6 to 12 is a big age range, and developmentally and conceptually, they'll be at many different levels. So you would have to know your child and scale this talk to the level of their understanding, just like the last group. All right, so here's our example. So everyone, let's talk about ways to harvest or collect clean energy. You've probably seen some of the structures used to collect clean energy. Solar farms, windmills, hydroelectric dams are just a few of the ways. Do you know of any of these near us? I feel like there's a solar farm somewhere nearby. Maybe you've seen it. We should take a drive-by sometime or check the maps and see if we can get some imagery. I'd be really curious what kinds of clean energy resources we're using in our neighborhoods to power our grid. Do you know about solar, wind, or water energy harvesting devices? Like the details? Let's pick one of them and delve deeper into how they're built or how they harvest energy, whatever you're kind of interested in. So let your child pick one, solar, wind, hydro, whatever. And I think that the 6 to 12 group is a great group to start adding some independence. So let them kind of guide the conversation so that they actually so it helps them maintain interest if they're picking bits and pieces of what they want to learn about or talk about. So I've included an example talk for solar, wind, and water, and I'll just quickly kind of go through those. It's so that you have the information you need if you wanted to try this out with your kids, but I would just talk about one with them, whichever they pick. So for solar energy harvesting devices like solar panels, we see a lot of the times at local farms or on rooftops. There are some houses in our neighborhood even that have solar panels on their roofs. They collect light energy from the sun and convert it to electrical energy. Do you know where the energy goes? Like they get it from the sun, and then what happens to the energy? Does it directly go into the outlets, or is there what happens once it does collect the energy? So the answer to that would be they're typically stored in batteries, or the farms powered directly into the grid. How do panels collect the light? What does that mean to collect light? Well, the solar panels are made with materials that absorb light from the sun. How do they convert light energy to electrical current? What would that process be? Is that something that we can easily find? So the answer is that materials in the cell absorb light energy and then they release it as electricity or current. Maybe we can drive by some solar farms this week, find them on the map, and maybe you can let me know what you find. Kids have access to phones most of the time for this age, or tablets, or computers, or whatever. They could easily find, on whatever maps app they use, some different solar farms near them, and you guys could go and drive by, and it gives you a sense of community and also shows you it's really important to example to your children that these are the ways you're contributing to society when you are building these devices or learning about the science of these devices. And I really like promoting a sense of community in my kids. So here's the wind example. Wind energy harvesting devices are like the windmills we see at farms or in big fields. Sometimes they're by the beach. Sometimes they're even in the ocean. They collect mechanical wind energy and convert it into electrical energy. So it's a little different than solar. They're collecting mechanical, not light energy. So where does the energy go? How does it work? So batteries, or it goes into the grid. How do windmills collect the wind energy? So windmills are a turbine that spins when the wind hits them. That movement is a form of energy. How do they convert the mechanical energy to electrical current? They actually contain a generator that's able to do that. So keep the answer simple. And what's nice about keeping the answer simple is that it allows them to explore in more depth exactly what they're interested in exploring. So you're not kind of lecturing them, you're giving them a platform to start thinking about, and then they're guiding you in the direction that they want to go. Because this is all extracurricular stuff. So it's neat because we can let them kind of tailor what they want to learn, and then it sticks with them better because they have an interest in it. And then we'll teach them the concepts they need to know using any kind of system, basically. Maybe we can drive by some windmills this week. If you find them on the map and get me some addresses, we can drive by and then follow up with your kids and actually do that on a weekend, or leave a little early if you drop them off for school and take a new path. Here's an example for water energy harvesting devices as well. So energy harvesting devices that use water for the source of energy are like hydroelectric dams. Sometimes we see them on rivers or waterfalls. They collect the mechanical energy that the water gives them as it pushes on these systems, and they convert it to an electrical energy. Where does the energy go? What happens once that wave hits that system? That mechanical energy gets converted to electrical energy, but then is it stored? Yeah, it's usually stored in a battery or it goes into the grid. How do harvesting devices collect the water energy? What's the physical device, or what's the science behind that? What happens when the water hits this system? What is this system? So usually hydroelectric dams are a turbine that spins when the water hits them. And that movement is a form of mechanical energy that then gets converted. So how do you think that they actually convert the mechanical energy to electrical current? Well, they contain a generator, and that generator specifically is there to convert mechanical energy to a current. And you could delve deeper into that too. Maybe you're a mechanical engineer and you know how this generator works and how the turbine works, or perhaps you've built something similar. This would be a great way to relate back to what you specifically know. If you are an engineer or a scientist or whatever you are, relate it back to what you do and tell an anecdote or something like that. Maybe we can drive by hydropower dams this week. Find them on the map and let me know what you find. So again, promoting a sense of community. So it's really important to engage your 6 to 12-year-old and start sparking their interest and involvement. Give them the understanding and the platform they need to pursue that spark, and then engage and discuss with them and show interest in their interests. So if they pick, solar energy, get excited about it, get involved, start looking into the devices, maybe get them a little solar panel to power something in your house or some solar lights. Just when they start to show enthusiasm, even if you're not that enthusiastic in it, find some aspect of it that you are enthusiastic about it, because these are all pretty broad topics and there should be something in there that you can also find interest in too, so that they feel that you share an interest with them. I think that's really important with kids. So with kids in the 12 plus category, we want to not only engage them, but they need to start questioning, troubleshooting, start finding reliable resources, and then use those resources to propose alternative methods of doing things. So you're starting to get them in the mindset that they need for college. If they're pursuing a degree in chemistry, then they need to be able to ask questions and, look up the answers, figure it out, question everything around them, and then start exploring avenues to answer those questions. So we want them to understand content, but we want to teach them, but we also want them to find out a lot for themselves through guided activities, thought experiments. And it's important to also let them dictate information back to us. I really like to talk, if you haven't noticed, and I have to stop myself from talking too much, or my kids won't be able to repeat back the information to me. So you have to really, rein yourself in, ask them questions, and then don't just jump to the answer if they don't know it. Keep teasing out answers. It's really important. This section again builds off the previous sections, so you would need to pick and choose what you want to include and present the topic in a way your specific child understands. So for the 12 plus example, we've talked about 3 different types of energy harvesting devices: solar, wind, water. We also discussed a very limited number of ways that energy can be harvested using these devices. There's also thermoelectric, which uses heat from the sun, or piezoelectric, which converts pressure to electrical energy. There's so many different types of energy harvesting devices. We should explore the different types of devices for one of these sometime. So maybe we've talked about solar, wind, water. Maybe sometime we could look into piezo or thermoelectric and see what the types of devices are for harvesting those. Maybe look that up sometime and see if one of them is interesting to you and we can read about it together. What are some problems you can think of that solar devices might encounter? And some examples of issues that your 12 plus year old might come up with. Sunlight is not always very bright. It moves throughout the day. Panels can get dirty. What about wind? Water? There's no right or wrong answers here. Encourage creative perspective and thought. So get your child thinking about the different types of issues, and you can add issues too, but don't shoot down what they come up with. Let them come up with an idea, and then if you think it's not an actual problem, maybe say, like, let's say they're concerned about the sun moving throughout the day. You could say, oh, well, I've read that they actually aim the device so that it's at the brightest point the sun would be at on average, or you know what I mean? Like, you can offer possible solutions, but don't tell them, no, that's not a problem because it actually is a problem. There's just also a proposed solution or method to do it already. So the point here is getting them to think about problems so that then they could propose ideas or solutions. And it's not a novel problem yet because it's probably already been discovered, but they will eventually encounter novel problems when they start getting into more advanced topics in STEM. So, what are some solutions you can think of that might solve these issues you just said? Maybe we can read the scientific literature and see if anyone's found solutions, or we can look up different industry websites and see if they discuss some of the shortcomings of their devices. Why don't you pick an issue to investigate and I'll pick another issue and we can chat about it at breakfast tomorrow? So make sure you follow up. So you can kind of see I really change my tone when I talk to the different kids ages. When it's younger, it's playful. When it's the middle module of 6 to 12, it's inquisitive. When it's at 12 plus, it's informative and direct and asking very targeted questions. And then there's not a ton of content in there for the 12-year-old because they should have a basic understanding already. And now it's their job to kind of go and investigate more. So I give them a very brief, direct request, a bunch of ideas, and then send them off. And then what's really important with the 12 plus category is that you as a parent follow up. Hey, remember when we said we were going to look into piezoelectric devices? I actually found an article about that. Did you see they're putting in roads that are piezoelectric in these different countries? How neat is that we could potentially power our electric vehicles using a piezoelectric road? Like, you've got to follow up because they won't think about this again unless you think about it again and you ask them, did you ever look it up? What did you think? And then if they didn't look it up, then you have something to talk about with them. Talk about the roads, talk about the cars. Oh, can you think about an issue with that? Why do you think we don't implement that here in our city? Is it just a money issue? Is there an engineering concern? Like, get them thinking about it. And then if they come up with something or they found an answer, great. If it's not exactly what you did, start asking them questions to get them to go into in depth, even deeper than they did before. And I remember being this age, and I remember talking to my dad about a bunch of random, popular science topics. And it's one of the things that sparked my interest in science, was seeing that he's interested. He thinks this is a neat topic. He sent me, a news article, and then we chat about the potential issues, the viability. We still do it to this day, and I'm, in my 30s. So I think showing that you have an interest in these different things will spark your child's interest, and then following up on what you actually sent them or talked about will keep that interest going because they're busy and they have their minds on many different things, and it helps if we follow through. So add a reminder and stick with it because your kid won't learn unless you make an effort to learn too. So one of the really important things is there's no right or wrongs. It's a discussion. We're trying to encourage an inquisitive nature. We're trying to encourage involvement and engagement. And then again, we're following through. And the same for, all this entire talk. The purpose is really to take science and add it to their lives in a way that both teaches them concepts and introduces them to STEM, but also relates it to what they know already. So we're not submerging them in STEM. We're incorporating the STEM into their life in a way that they can understand. So it's about bringing little bits of science into their lives so that when they do reach advanced courses, they already have the terminology and the basic concepts and what they need to know to then approach the more advanced topics. So this was again our STEM Stacks episode of the STEM Factually podcast. Thanks for listening. If you do try to have this mealtime talk with your kids, I'd love to hear your feedback or your experience with it and how it was received. You can follow us on social media. We're also on Patreon. You can visit my website. All those links are in the descriptions of the podcast episode. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll tune in for our next episode.